Welcome to this week's Rob's Country. We're going to be talking about a lot of things, including our own health. We're going to be talking about BioBrew. We're going to be talking about a lot of other things, including meeting a Waikato dairy farmer who's doing very well. But first of all, not human health, but animal health and antibiotics. Well, there's a bit of concern starting to loom.
There is. It's a very topical issue recently. I just recently went to the National Veterinary Conference, and as part of that conference we invite the presidents of kindred countries, Canada, United States, Australia, Great Britain, and so all the presidents came and they all gave addresses, and every one of them had highlighted antibiotic stewardship and the way these drugs are used as a major thing, that major aspect of veterinary business, and a lot of pressure being brought to bear by local governments, national governments, and of course internationally as well.
So what are the concerns?
Okay, so the big concerns are that we're getting a development of antibiotic resistant bacteria, and of course in the human sector it becomes quite emotive when we've got what traditionally may have been relatively simple diseases to treat, and now we've got populations of bacteria that we're struggling to find antibiotics that will kill them. And the finger has been pointed to some degree at the veterinary profession and the use of antibiotics in livestock and animals as a way that may be important in promoting these resistant bacteria.
How does it occur? Same as parasite resistance?
Well, so the implication is that when we get low ineffective doses of antibiotic exposed to a population of bacteria, we speed up the development of that population being resistant to that particular antibiotic. And so there's two ways in which this can occur. Either we have poor use or poor choices of antibiotic treatment in, for instance, pet animals, and we end up with populations of pet animals then harbouring resistant populations of bugs that then can be transferred to the owners, for instance. But much more importantly, and causing many more headlines, is the possibility of low-level residues of antibiotic in food, in meat and milk, and then that antibiotic residue, that low levels of antibiotic, is then consumed by the consumer and exposes human populations of bacteria to these ineffective low doses of antibiotics and promote the development of resistant bugs.
Yeah, that's going to be a trick one, isn't it?
It is difficult. I think the reality is that a lot of good science says that the veterinary driving of these resistant populations is not half as bad as people may think, and actually most of the problem is coming from the human use of antibiotics rather than veterinary use.
Yeah, but we don't know, do we?
Well, it's easy to point the finger, and I guess it's up to us all to start looking at this seriously and being responsible members of society in general, and being aware of this problem. And there's some simple things that we can do to make sure that we're using these things responsibly. So I think the first thing for people to understand is that the resistance is in the bugs, it's not in the animal. You don't get an animal that suddenly the treatment doesn't become effective. It's the bugs themselves that are becoming resistant, and that's a very important aspect to understand. The second thing is that we need to be very, very aware of withholding times and abide by them religiously. And so by doing so, the risk of antibiotic residue getting into the human population through food is minimal.
Well, it's certainly reduced a long way anyway. So.
Exactly, yeah. So the second issue is one antibiotic isn't the same as another. So there's many, many different types of antibiotic, and some antibiotics are much more effective in certain types of infection than others. And so in that regard, it's very important to use antibiotics as prescribed or as instructed by the veterinarian that's supplying it. And so, for instance, if a veterinarian enables a sheep and beef farmer to have access to, for instance, penicillin, which is an exceptionally good antibiotic for the likes of lameness problems, foot problems, things like that, it certainly may not be the right choice for an episode of infectious diarrhoea, for instance. And so very important to use the drugs as instructed and only in the conditions that it's been prescribed for and instructed to be used on. And in a similar light, it's very, very bad practice for a farmer to possibly give his neighbour or maybe the lifestyle block holder down the road a dose of penicillin for one or other ailment that may or may not be effectively treated by that antibiotic. One, it's illegal, and if there's any residues and it's traced, for instance, that particular farmer could be putting himself in the firing line for prosecution. But perhaps the biggest risk is someone like a lifestyle farmer that gets one of these drugs from a commercial farmer down the road that has access to it, may not really understand the concept of the withholding times required, and so it could be very easy in that situation to get residues getting through into the food chain.
And we now do have traceability. We can go back, can't we?
Absolutely, and they will be investigated. Any residue is investigated very, very rigorously these days. So,
are we using too much of it?
New Zealand, on the whole, is currently, when we look at international usage statistics, very, very good. Of course, our dairy industry uses a vast amount of antibiotic. Most of it is used in the treatment of mastitis. But when we look at it internationally, on a per head of cattle population or per head of animal population, we are very, very low use. And the throwing away of growth promotant use of antibiotics is a major positive factor in preventing these issues.
Thank you very much indeed. After the break, we'll be talking about an alternative, which is probably going to be a very good idea. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Well, Nick Page has just given you a gimme, hadn't he? I mean, you just walked straight through that door.
Well, the subject of antibiotics is always a good one for a guy who sells probiotics. I'll agree with you there.
I mean, and obviously there is a lot of very intensive looking at the antibiotics and the use that they're getting at the moment.
I think we've all got a vested interest in making sure that the antibiotics that we have work for as long as possible. And if we're going to do that, it is going to be because we use them very, very well. And that means use them very, very little. Avoid them when you can. And a good tool to use instead of antibiotics is a probiotic.
You and your guys out at Lincoln, doing a lot of at Lincoln University, can you see microbiotics taking over from antibiotics?
Well, Malik Hussein, the scientist that we work with at Lincoln, said that probiotics in the 21st century will be what antibiotics were to the 20th century. Working with the living systems in the animal's gut is a very productive and safe way to promote health. Rather than trying to kill microbes that are causing a problem, better to put good ones in that fight with them, and that's where probiotics come in.
We're a wee way away from having yoghurt for a sore throat, though, aren't we?
There's a lot of work left to do, and the scientific work that we've started at Lincoln, we think is going to be not only a multi-year but a multi-decade project. And really, the beginnings that we have with yogurt just hint at what we'll be able to do in years to come. But we do know which microbes do good things in the gut, and we can give affordable access to those bugs to farmers.
We know you as BioBrew, but tell me about EquiBrew.
EquiBrew, the word's out. We've been working behind the scenes to formulate an equine product. We're launching that at Equidays at Mystery Creek in October. And the early technical work that we've done at Lincoln, backed up by the testing work that we've given to a few horse owners and trainers out there, suggests that the formulation that we've put together works a treat. Horses, being hindgut fermenters, have very, very susceptible guts. They're very, very fragile systems compared to a ruminant. And I'm very, very confident that we will redefine the probiotic sector for horses.
And this will be mixed into hard feed, I guess, or whatever. How are you going to serve it?
Mixed into moist feed or with the water, as with production animals. Lots of horse owners will use a moist feed, and that's probably going to be the most common way that EquiBrew gets used.
So just pour a bit and mix it up like you do in molasses already.
That's right, exactly the same.
Yeah. You're doing some work with Lincoln University, as I said, and the latest one is sort of fresh and working on the fact that it has to be fresh.
Well, as you know, most probiotics that have been sold have been freeze-dried or pelletized products. No one has offered farmers a fresh probiotic product. So to describe what that means, we've had to go to Lincoln and develop some novel techniques to analyze our product that haven't been used in probiotics before. They've been using a gas chromatograph, a mass spectrometer, and various techniques with those machines.
You might have to explain some of that.
I would need to bring one of the guys in a lab coat in. That's all very impressive, but they're very sensitive machines that measure compounds that are found in BioBrew. And we're finding things like volatile fatty acids that are relevant for ruminants, butyric acid, L-lactic acid, and the like. And that shows not only are these very helpful compounds present in BioBrew, but that the microbes in BioBrew are making them and will do so all the way through the gut system of the animal.
So what you're saying is it's a little wee factory that's working the whole way through.
That's right. What we've done is demonstrate what that little factory is capable of producing so that farmers can have some assurance about what our product is doing inside their animal.
This is a natural occurrence normally? You're just boosting the army?
Well, you have to put together a formulation carefully. You have to assemble your team of microbes so that they work well together. And that's really the IP of BioBrew, is assembling that team to do exactly that good job. You can't just have any random group of guys on the rugby pitch. You've got to have a well-rehearsed, well-practiced team, and that's what we have.
Next up after you, we're going to be talking about a Waikato farmer, which brings me around to the point that you're actually coming into another calving season.
Yeah, our first calving customers up north have been ringing us and telling us it's time to deliver some BioBrew. We've got a few large-scale calf rearers up there that wouldn't start a season without us, and I'm very proud that those people are return customers each and every year.
So it's catching on?
Absolutely.
Good. Mid-Canterbury becoming, I'm going to get shot for this, but Mid-Canterbury is becoming a very, very strong centre for dairying. In fact, the whole of Canterbury is taking over from the Waikato, he says very quietly. But you've got a couple of field day downs there, well, some days down there.
That's right. Ashburton Trading Society, ATS, has their in-store days next week, the 10th and the 11th, Thursday and Friday. They're at their store in Ashburton, and we're going to be there supporting ATS and their Rural Co charge card.
That's going well, you're getting lots of feedback.
We're really excited about ATS and Rural Co. We think that's going to be a choice that lots of farmers take.
Good on you. It's going nationwide, which is great. Seriously, a lot of people are now saying that Canterbury will take over and Southland won't be very far behind them. So that'll be an interesting, we'll watch that dairying shift as it happens. But in the meantime, we caught up with a Waikato dairy farmer who has been around for quite some time already.
I started as an 18-year-old on 39% share milking 40 years ago, on the 1st of June coming up. Yeah.
Where are we now and how big is it?
Current property is 210 hectares, 203 effective, probably calving about 850 cows. Last year we did about 1,900 kilograms of milk solids. Farm across the road is 90 hectares, 86 effective, milking 324 cows. And that's done just on 1,600 this year.
Are they run as separate units or collectively?
Separate units, but with a, how would you say, bit of combination of teamwork. Yeah.
So there's a bit of an overseer of both.
Yeah. I oversee the properties. Both properties have managers on them. Both properties have different systems, but they do complement. We use the small farm as our trainer farm. That's the farm where younger people can go and learn how to manage and step up from there.
Waikato's had a couple of dry seasons.
Yeah, people have grumbled about it. I've started my farming career with some dry seasons, or what we call dry summers. People now tend to call them droughts. I I actually don't worry about dry seasons or droughts. Pitch the battle to win the season, and you just manage your resources and what have you. Yeah, but this last year was probably drier than most, but 08 was probably the most severe one we've had.
According to NIWA and experts in inverted commas, we're staring down the barrel of another one. What's your instant reaction to protecting?
For us ourselves, the season starts on the 1st of June and finishes on the 31st of May. And irrespective, we'll grow the same amount of grass. It's a matter of utilising all our resources and what have you. We always have plenty of supplements on hand for the fact that we can actually cover it. We just don't dry cows off. We try and complete seasons. So we just look at the season. Now, if we finish up having a good grass growing season, we use less supplement. That means that there's more supplement for the following year, or we purchase less.
I was going to say, do you grow or purchase?
We purchase all our feed. Our stocking rate's too high to actually grow. The only thing we grow is surplus grass, which goes into silage or baleage, but everything else is purchased.
How do you integrate the feed pad?
The feed pad was primarily put in as a safety issue for the farm. But it's a transition. We've learned a hell of a lot in a reasonable length of time. We started out just feeding out maize silage. We then went to using that resource better, just with a feed out wagon, to what we do now is it's a compound food for us now. There's maize silage, there's palm kernel, there's molasses going into it. We use minerals all the year round. There's a percentage of hay in that diet and what have you, with the mixer wagon and the water and all the rest of it. It's a real complex food now. We get better utilisation out of it, and we certainly get far better productive results out of it.
You're going to put a roof on it?
Yep, the roof's going on. Like if I was building a new pad today, it definitely would have a roof on it, because of the fact that there's the shading, lower heat for the cows, but the most important one is less water, generating less effluent. Because if you've got effluent, you've got a problem where you've got to handle the effluent.
Is the feed pad partly because of the shape of the property and it's a long way to the far side?
That was a real contributor to that decision. With 2.6 our longest walk, it was very...
and that's each way?
Yeah, that's each way. So, sometimes those cows they're doing a few marathons. But it was a good way of actually, the cows lose energy and lose production walking. So it was another way of stimulating them with more food, but also giving them a break before milking and all the rest of it. We use it twice a day, so the cows are getting a good feed, that we can maintain their body weights far better, the cow condition. The productive ability has certainly increased. Our cows always had the potential, and this is one way of getting closer to that potential.
Fertiliser?
Fertiliser's been an interesting year this year. We bought this property and had to put truckloads on, and like most developers and what have you, probably didn't read the soil tests, probably quite in the light of balancing it, and we finished up having some fairly fertile soils. Started cutting back about 6 years ago on the amount of fertiliser going onto the farm, mainly because as we increased the amount of feed going into the cows, the organic material going out to the paddocks was actually increasing, and that was actually contributing also to the fertility. Last spring we had metaboticals, and so we had to reason it out. So we started with herbage testing, and we also tested every paddock on the farm, and that's something we'll do from now on every year. There is a cost involved in it, but we've got to know what's coming off those paddocks through the grass into the cows' mouths, and the only way to do that is to test.
You're wearing a balance hat. They've got 3 strings to their bow. How do they fit into your operation?
Been a balanced shareholder for years. I'm a cooperative person. That's where my values are. Balance have always looked after us in regard to fertiliser and what have you. So that was our introduction, and then of course when Seals was purchased and what have you, we had already started with Seals prior to the purchase, and on our second farm that's our feeding regime there. Yeah.
And do you use Ag Hub?
Not yet. If we are, we're unaware of it. We use a lot of information. We steal, borrow and beg. So yeah, exactly on a formal basis, I don't know if we're quite with Ag Hub yet. Yeah.
I'm sure somebody will be coming around to see you.
No doubt.
What information are you after to, and how often, to keep everything in tune?
We're very proactive. We're always discussing between my manager and myself our needs, 3, 6, 12 months ahead of time. So between the two of us, we have a lot of information already, but we also collect a lot of information. So what do we actually need? Specifically, I can never tell you on any given day because probably it was a discussion I had yesterday. I've already moved on to the next phase. But from our business, what we need to have is accurate soil testing. We actually need to know what's happening with our effluent, the impact on that to the pasture, herbage testing and what have you. And then in regard to the second farm with feeding, we need to have good quality feed. That farm is actually doing only a little bit less than this farm with basically an in-shed feeding system, and we were totally reliant on that. So feed quality for that farm is terribly important.
So your manager's constantly manipulating and caressing?
On the home farm, yeah, day by day. I would probably talk to my manager here just about every day. If it's not me asking him something or telling him something, it's definitely him relaying to me or asking me or sounding me off, and then him back to the team. So every day the feed, the milk weights are analysed, the feed is actually preset relative to what our production's going. So we don't have any hidden surprises like we can't come at the end of the week and sort of think there's been a drop off in production. It just didn't happen because we've actually seen the increment changes as they're going.
Is there any information that you can think of that you can't get your hands on at the moment?
Not really, no. I can't talk for all farmers, but me, myself, no. I've got a telephone and I'm not scared to use it, and I sort of know who to tap if I need information. So, yeah, I don't myself have a problem.
Very briefly, where to from here?
Definitely not retirement. We are looking at setting up another farm. We're quite serious about setting up a farm with one of our managers because he's a real important part of our business. He may not have the opportunity of getting his own farm ownership, so we want to be part of his future. The agriculture has been very kind to me and also my family. My parents were Dutch immigrants, came out here, bought their first farm. Dad died very early in age, so I was the oldest at 21 with 3 brothers. We all finished up owning our own dairy farm. Great opportunity, and I think we need to be part of that opportunity for the next people coming in behind us.
So that's your future, but what about Balance's future? Where would you like them to go to help you with yours?
Okay. It's an interesting concept, and I think it's something that other industries are challenged with it at the moment. We've made huge increases, but collectively, if you look at the average for the country and what have you, there's still a big gain to be made. The demand for world food and what have you means that we do have to, fill those gaps and what have you. So, things that I can see Balance playing a big part in is probably like some of the things we've done. Soil testing every paddock, know what needs to go onto the paddock, so you're monitoring your resources and your costs closer, getting the results of those grasses and whatever, things like herbage tests and whatever are an important part. Effluent, of course, is going to be a huge challenge. The farms, if you go back 30 years ago, the soil was like blotting paper and it needed humus and it needed nutrients and whatever. That tank is now topped built up. So going forward, you know, how we the fertiliser, the effluent plays a part in maintaining that balance and what have you, so our responsibility to the environment. And I think the other part that's really, really important is that we've bred very, very good cows. The only thing we have to do is get the potential, and I think there's a lot of potential still left on a lot of farms, and food quality plays a very big part in that. Some of the development with seals, with calf meal and what have you, and I know some of the trials that have gone on, that if you're looking at competitive pricing and all the rest of it, it's quite easy to take a cheaper option. But from the results that are coming back that have been done in trials and what have you, seals calf feed is far superior. Now that is really, really important because growth rates and all the rest of it and what have you. So basically results for your money spent. But likewise in the cow sheds and all the rest of it, there's a lot of farmers that actually could put an in-shed feeding system in and what have you. So they could actually do away with things like drenching, which makes one man milking easier, so labour requirements and what have you. But getting that feed into the cows and all the rest of it and what have you, things like lower empty rates, higher productivity and what have you. Probably even looking after those younger heifers, you know, we've got a huge wastage in that heifer bracket and what have you. But if we can get them fed properly and all the rest of it, so they do get in calf, do come into that second season, and when they're losing their teeth and all the rest of it, we're protecting them.
How close do you want their consultants to your shoulder?
Personally, it doesn't worry me because I always know when to tell people to leave. Yeah, I look. I think it's consultancy is a bit tricky. You need to get the farmers to grow with the consultant. Don't just go and give advice, because when the consultant leaves, the advice stops. Farmers have to learn to take ownership, and if they can actually grow with it. I know years ago as a dairy company director, we had an incentive where we put a consultant in, and we put it in the bottom 25% quartile. Now all these people doubled or 40% increased their production and what have you. Unfortunately, when we turned that tap off, their production went back to where it was. So that's a trick. You know, we need to step the game up, but then we need to maintain the game.
Very important advice there. Really, when you think about it, interest rates coming up and the price coming down, that gap in the middle is very intensive, and it's not what you do, it's how you do it. After the break, it's pain and whether you're actually clutching the right part. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Bet you as a chiropractor want to say something about probiotics and antibiotics.
Absolutely. We are actually more germs in our body than we are cells in our body. So if we were to say whether we were more human or bug, I would say we'd actually be more bug. And that's we're a living ecosystem. So if you take those antibiotics at the hospital, take the probiotics afterwards for your own health too, just like your animals.
Seriously, I don't want to dwell on it for too long because
Yeah.
there's so many other things I want to talk to you about. But I mean, we really should have a very close look at what we are doing there. And you as a chiropractor, it's no longer hairy legs and long hair, is it?
No, it's. I'm actually a certified nutrition specialist as well, so I focus on that as much as I do the chiropractic work. So focusing on the diet is really important on keeping your body healthy, keeping you pain-free, and keeping you going the right way. And the probiotics are really good for keeping that intestinal lining feeling good and doing what it should for you.
And of course, there's those of us who would say that whiskey cures everything but bacon. Anyway, we shall move on. Pain. Apparently, it seems as though we may be clutching the wrong part of the body when we suddenly get a twinge.
Absolutely. Just like when we have heart attacks and we grab our arm or the left side of our neck, that's not where our heart is, and that's not where the actual problem is, but that's where the pain is referred to. This is a mechanism that happens in many other parts of our body. For instance, if you have low back pain, quite often it can be stress-related or it can be food-related, and it can be coming from whether it be your intestines or your stomach pain or just some ulcer or something going on in your body that you need to get checked out and come into a chiropractic office or another office and get looked at, because it's not necessarily the low back that's causing it.
That's interesting you should say that, because most people think that a chiropractor treats backs and that's it.
Yep. That is a very common misconception, but I would actually say we treat bones. We're bone doctors specifically, any joint in the body, but also you have to look at the relationship of the body. Not just bones being bones and soft tissue being soft tissue and your head being your head. It's all related because it's all within you. And trying to separate that is a very westernized thought process, trying to separate your arm pain from your leg pain from whatever, because they're completely different, but they're all within you. And for one example, stress can really set up all these different things in one person, and they may not seem to have anything connected between them other than they're part of you.
One of the problems that I can see, well, not a problem, it's an interesting thing,
Yeah.
is that I stretch myself out on either yours or John O'Malley's bench,
Yeah.
and you keep sort of poking in all sorts of areas when I have no idea what you're doing. I mean, there must be trigger points that you go straight to.
Well, they're stress points, I would call them.
Is that what it is? Stress
Yes.
points?
So think of us back to when we were cavemen, cavewomen, 50,000, 100,000 years ago, and we were having stress then. Stress was the form of a saber-toothed tiger jumping off a rock and attacking us and having a bunch of cuts all over our arms if we survive. Otherwise, we're dead, and it doesn't matter the response our body has. Or a neighboring tribe comes along and throws a spear at us or has a knife and cuts us, and then we have these wounds from that too. Or a forest fire burns us. In all these cases, we have wounds that we have to let heal. And we're not smart enough being cavemen 100,000 years ago to know that we have to go lay down and let those injuries heal. So what we do is we get pain response in our feet, in our hands, in our low back, in our neck, and we get forced to go lay down. But nowadays we can't do that because we have to go to work, we have to pay the bills, we have to get the food on the table, and then all of a sudden we have that event where something goes and you have to lay down, you have to give it a break.
So the body basically says woo.
Yep. And then that's when we see the structural thing like, okay, now you blew a disc, you pulled this muscle, you whatever, but it's not because of that specific area gave out, it's because of all this other stuff building up, and then that was the weak spot, that was the last thing to go.
But the interesting thing, Carl, is that most people will say, yeah, I'm unstressed because the crop's been real bad this year, or the dairy price is coming back, the interest rates are going up, I can't afford to go off for a week and get the sun on my back and cook almonds.
Yeah. Something as simple as listening to relaxing music, doing a relaxing exercise, or getting out and exercising out on your own, going for a walk. All things like that are ways to relieve stress. Going in to get a massage, get a chiropractic work, any type of alternative medicine, they're all stress relieving events. So I'd recommend.
Which aren't going to cost you an airfare to Tonga.
Exactly. Exactly, and you can do them every week. I have a weekly routine that I follow, and if I don't do it, I'm quite a mess too.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. Me and John work on this all the time on people that come into the office, but we have to work on it on ourselves, otherwise we start to fall apart too. And it's part of life, and you can't go lay in your cave anymore. Nowadays, you have to be out there functioning in this world that we're not meant to be stressed into having to do, because I'm not meant to be dressed in this waist jacket and standing up in front of these cameras. I'm meant to be foraging around in the woods and living like that, and we're getting forced to live in this, and we have to find ways to cope.
Exactly. So your suggestion to somebody who has had a bad season and who's got interest rates that are coming up to about there,
Yep.
that they do what?
Take a little time for themselves. Each day, each week, whether it be going for a walk with your spouse, whether it be listening to some good music that you like and you find relaxing, anything.
Just kick back.
Just kick back a little bit each day and try and get those worries out of your mind.
If you can.
If you can.
If you can't, you go to a chiropractor and they'll take him out for you.
Exactly. We take it on, and it's a little bit more painful than when you do it, because we work on those spots where you're building up all that stress and we force it out of you.
Oh, God's strength to you, buddy. Thanks very much indeed. After the break, it's Jim Grayson's back. Welcome back, and I can say that to you too. Where have you been?
Well, we toured over to Europe and went through Denmark, looking at plant breeding programs for black currants and other soft berry fruit, and also trial areas and things like that. Also saw a lot of other crops, which were very interesting, and caught up with quite a bit of the processing this time too, Rob. And then we went on to Poland to International Black Currant Conference, right over in the border of Russia. But we spent, there was three of us spent 3-4 days prior to the conference going around Poland itself, and that was very, very interesting.
So how far are we behind, or are we ahead as far as black currants are concerned?
Oh, we're definitely one of the leaders of the world. Denmark would have to be another country that is. However, their plant breeding programs come apart a little bit. The structure's changed somewhat. And when you've got a plant breeding program, it's not something that happens in 5 minutes. It takes 15, 20 years to find a cultivar, take it all through its processes, and eventually it becomes a commercial item. So if you get a break in that, that'll be reflected, say, 2025 or something like that, and they have had a break in their program, which is a bit disturbing because the three main countries, Scotland, New Zealand, Poland, and Denmark, so four, that when we swap and not only knowledge but also tissue culture and cuttings and what have you. So it's broken down a little bit, which is a bit of disappointing for the Danes guide. They're darn good growers and they grow very good fruit. And of course they've got the tradition in Europe, more so than we have in the southern hemisphere, of consuming blackcurrant, strawberries, raspberries, sour cherries, much more than we do, for health reasons mainly. So yeah, very interesting.
You don't have any problem getting those cultures into New Zealand, for example?
We do at the moment. Unfortunately, in fact, we're discussing this as an industry problem with MPI, simply because the PSA and the kiwi fruit has stopped to put a halt to all importation of new cuttings and germplasm, and we need to readdress that. It's not the problem we thought it was, and we need to, and they've certainly streamlined the processes. So in fact, we just had a meeting the other day regarding this, and we're going to go along and talk to our friendly politicians again, and see if we can get them to give the green light again to importation of especially of germplasm.
Yeah, because we don't want to fall behind, do we, with old-fashioned and non-producing compared to everyone else's.
Look, a country that produces so much food for the world, we definitely don't want to be falling behind. And look, they understand that, and there were very good reasons why they stopped it at that particular point in time. But it's time to relook at it and I think move on from it and get importation going in again.
What else did you see? I mean, you said you saw other crops.
Yeah, well, we saw quite a lot of course, grass seed and I don't know a lot about ryegrass, but grass seed and clover production in Nyborg, which is one of the bigger islands of Denmark. And apparently they have got quite an association with our seed companies here in New Zealand. And then in Poland, I mean, I was in Poland 11 years ago, and although at that stage it was about 9 years out of communism and it had joined the EU, none of the money had started to come in, but I can assure you, you're just in a totally different country now. There's been billions of euros gone into Poland, and they've got a very stable government, and they've got just literally thousands of beautiful fertile acres and acres of fertile land, and they're getting their infrastructure right. I mean, there's tractors there now. I saw green tractors and red tractors. Well, last time there was horse and carts. I'm not exaggerating. And there's crops. There's wall-to-wall crops. It goes for hundreds of miles. And we spent 3 days going around the southern parts of Poland over to just to the edge of Ukraine. In fact, we went into Ukraine and then on up to the northeast part of Poland, and we had a conference right on the border, actually, of Russia. And I mean, it was just wheat, acres of course, black currants. I mean, black currants they produce 50% of the world's blackcurrant production.
Poland does?
Poland does, yeah. So they're big producers of that, big producers of raspberries and strawberries. But I mean, their apples and their sour cherries, and I mean, it was fantastic, and the vegetables. And a lot of it now, although their relationship is warming, and irrespective of what's going on politically in that region of the world, they're relying more and more, or Russia are relying more and more on getting produce and food from Poland, where before Poland didn't have the ability to produce it. Now they have. They're actually, Russia's becoming one of their big export markets.
Should we be worried, Jim?
No, I don't think we should be at all. I dare say if they really got cranked up, they could feed the world, but you know, they still need somebody on the other side of the world doing it better, and we do it better.
And off-season.
And off-season.
How big an advantage is that for us?
Oh, it's huge. I believe it's, you know, the markets will say, marketeers will say there's only cracks that we're slipping our market products into, but look, we are doing things, so many things so well, and because of our size, we can afford to stay in the higher echelon food area, and it's big. And the world is getting more wealthy. China is and Russia is. And I mean, there's more Mercedes-Benz in Moscow than there are anywhere else, if you know what I mean. And I'm talking about Mercedes-Benz in Russia, for God's sake. But it's incredible. So the wealth is there. There's no doubt about that. And when you go, when I was there 11 years ago in Poland, went into Warsaw Airport, and it was the size of Dunedin Airport or Nelson Airport. Today it's a massive airport and 6-lane highways going away from it, beautiful hotels beside it. Somebody's got to pay for this, of course, but I mean, that's not our problem. And the economy is starting to improve, there's no doubt about that. And the people are friendly, they speak a lot more speaking English and a lot more wanting to eat better food. And I think that's important to us.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on your life membership for Camp Quality
Yeah,
too.
thank you.
After the break, we're going to be talking to Doug Archbold, and he's been away as well. Well, it seems people either want to talk about microbiotics or antibiotics or travel. Where have you been?
Well, Rob, we've just come back from a cruise which included the west coast of Africa, and the first shot you've got there is...
So you brought your scrapbook with you?
I did. It's,
Let's have a look.
It's in Angola,
Yeah.
in southern Angola near the Namibian border, and Angola is exactly the opposite of Jim's trip. The infrastructure is almost non-existent. The roads are shocking.
Worse than Christchurch?
Worse than Christchurch. And it's a real third world country which has had 30 years of civil war. So it's going ahead, Angola, but it's going to take a while.
Okay, number 2. Look at that. Where's that? What's that?
Now, this is in Senegal, and this is travelling on a highway. Now, that is typical of all the third world countries we went to in Africa, and that is rubbish. Rubbish. Whoever invented plastic, it's everywhere. It's in the rivers, it's on the road, it's over the nearest bank or in the gutter.
It looks quite dry there.
It's most of those countries are semi-arid countries.
Okay.
Now, that gives you an idea of the roads. Now, that is a clay road. We had to share that with donkey carts, horse carts. You had to allow plenty of time to get somewhere because the congestion was just mind-boggling. It's really something.
Bit of construction going on in there.
Yes. There's things are happening, and the people generally look as if they're pretty happy. But wow, it's just so different from what we used to. Now, I know this is in Senegal again. Now, this is a market garden, and I thought I'd show this because it shows the irrigation technique. If you look really hard, that guy has actually got 2 watering cans, and there's a lot of these black guys doing this watering. They filled the cans up from holes that dug in the water table was quite high, but that was the closest thing we saw to an irrigation scheme, believe it or not. Now, This is in Morocco, and Morocco is it's twice as big as New Zealand, and as we drove along the roads, we often saw goats, and there's some sheep there as well, and they always had someone with them. So agriculture accounts for only 14% of the GDP, but 45% of the employment. So it's important in that sense. But Morocco is the 3rd biggest producer of phosphate in the world. Now that is an Argane tree. Now that is actually a goat.
At the left-hand side, halfway up.
20 feet up the tree. Now they eat the fruit and the leaves. It's something I thought was a little bit different. If I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't believe that a goat could get up a tree like that.
Yeah, it was obviously hungry enough.
Now here we are in Morocco, in a town some distance from Agadir, the capital. Now they told us that the lump of meat on the left there was beef, but we had a strong suspicion that that could actually be horse meat.
Doesn't look
You'll
right.
see all the
It
meat.
doesn't look the right shape for a cattle beast.
All the meat is out in the open.
Flies
and
everywhere.
amazingly, though, we didn't see any flies, but there was several shops of similar with the meat on display out in the open. Now, I brought this back because I
That's
thought
lovely, Doug.
some of the people in our transport department might see that. That was a common sight. The roads with loads like that, it looks like it's going to tip over. The other thing that you saw a lot of was very old vehicles, very rusty, and utes with people riding in the backs of them. It was just an amazing. It's so different from what we know here.
That load, you'd have to be a very gentle driver to get around a corner.
Well, you would. I mean, that was a highway that it was on, and it wasn't. It was quite a good road. Morocco would be the more developed of those three countries that we went to.
So, are they on the way up, or are they still struggling? You think of Africa, you think of famine.
No, well, all those countries were colonised by European countries, and when they were granted independence, they had a civil war, so that knocked them back. And now they're going ahead, but there's a huge foreign influence. I mean, Angola, China has a huge influence. They do a lot. It's their biggest trading partner. And Morocco, would you believe, supplies 80% of the cannabis resin that's used in Europe. So,
Really?
yes, so it's a major industry as well.
I mean, you're talking about Poland earlier, we were, and the fact that they've come a long way. Are these guys about to expose themselves to boof or not?
Well, it's going to be slow. The poverty is mind-boggling. In Angola, they had a 4.2 billion mausoleum, and within 200 metres, you had acres and acres of slums.
Well,
Contrasts.
Welcome back. Phone numbers that you'll want to be jotting down on the screen now. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed Rob's Country Widow. We'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.